Before I give my response to Amos Yee's video, the one that Shuonhead also responded to, I would like to give you guys my own personal history with dealing with paedophile advocation on the internet that I've experienced over the last 3 years. I will of course include a bunch of timestamps in the description if you'd like to skip this or skip any other parts of the video. Many of you know that Irate Alex is not my first channel. It is now my main channel and the one I'm obviously focusing on. But I had another channel, and that of course was called Irate Bear. And on Irate Bear, I would respond to people who I thought were ideologically incorrect. You know, people that made claims about certain groups of people, and I would do my best to either debunk that or just make fun of them because they acted like lunatics. Roughly I don't know, maybe 6 to 8 months after I first started doing this properly, I had a run-in with a group called Heart's Progress. Many of you watching will remember them. They were a paedophile advocacy group, and many thought that they were trolls. I still don't believe they were. They were a small group of people on the internet using websites like Twitter and Reddit and YouTube to advocate the concept of paedophilia being added to the LGBT. Historically, there have been other advocacy groups that have also tried to do this. And at that time, a YouTuber by the name of Jeff Holiday, who is a long-term acquaintance of mine, probably someone who I'd consider to be a friend, alerted the entire community to a group of people calling themselves MAP or no MAP, minor attracted person. Effectively a politically correct term used for pedophiles that wanted to exist in the light. These different groups of people, and of course individuals, were trying to normalize the idea of adult-child relationships. Many of them making horrid arguments that children can consent to an adult relationship, and of course we all know that that's not the case. A few debates were had around this time, and in fact I do remember Andy Warski on a live stream a couple years ago with Blair White telling his story about his abuse at the hands of abusers, pedophiles, and how that affected him as a person. I don't know if that stream is still up, but if you can find it, I do recommend you go give it a watch. I do believe that that was a debate with a chap who called himself Omnipolitics16. There are of course rumors that the guy died or he killed himself or whatever, but I can't confirm nor deny that. Now, when I decided to have a crack at the pedos, I mean, I made a couple videos having a crack at these people, they decided to brigade me. Heart's Progress themselves specifically brigaded me. Now, at the time, I think I had this channel, I had a live stream channel, which is now my old archive channel, and of course, what was at the time my main one, Irate Bear. And they managed to yeet 2 of them. They managed to completely flag them to the point where they were just taken down, just completely gone. You'd be like that, oh, but YouTube has this system in place where you get warnings now. Yeah, back then we didn't. If back then, you know, only 2 years ago, if people wanted to take your channel down, it wasn't that hard for them to do so. You know, it would only take about 3 people to just flag your channel and boom, you were gone. And at the time, I was in contact with a chap called Ben, who's known as Trusted Flagger, who's now MIA for some reason, who managed to get my channels back. Luckily, thank God for that. Now those pedos back then, the no maps or maps, were trying to make various arguments that children could consent to a sexual adult relationship. Always completely disregarding the overwhelming proof that any kind of sexual relationship, before you're ready for it, before sexual maturity, at the very minimum, can have damaging consequences and catastrophic consequences for that person when they grow up. And I don't know what happened to Heart's Progress, but I have came across many accounts on Twitter over the last 3 years that are calling themselves no map or map, or they have various other symbols that kind of, you know, that let other people know, that signals to other people that they are pedos, and they spend a lot of time on Twitter advocating this kind of shit, advocating that it should be a part of the LGBT. No. Pedophilia, or your minor attracted person, is not a sexuality. There is something very, very broken in your head. Very broken. It is not a sexuality. It is not a part of LGBT. It's disgusting, it's extremely damaging, and it hurts kids. But of course, it doesn't matter if you bring up these arguments, if you show these people all the proof. It doesn't matter to them because, well, to them it's their sexuality, you know? And of course, it's not just guys that do this kind of crap, it's also women that do this kind of crap. Like, I'm not even talking about teachers here having sex with their, underage male students, who are also pedophiles, by the way. You know, Shoe on Head brought up a fantastic point. There's a massive double standard, and we need to address that. You know, how many times have we seen in the news, male teacher raped this? It's also rape if a female teacher has sex with a underage boy, by the way. It's classified as statutory rape. Now, some of you who are subscribed to the YouTuber Count Dankula may have seen his live stream debate with Amos Yee. And of course, that's the person who we will be responding to today. And that was a pretty funny live stream, if I'm honest. You know, Dank had brought up plenty of arguments in his video, but he also managed to piss off Amos Yee quite a bit. And there's nothing quite as funny, nothing that quite tickles me as much as watching Amos Yee get triggered. And there is one thing I'd like to add before we get into the response to Amos Yee's video. And that is the idea of free speech being brought up here. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Now, most of you know that I'm an advocate for freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Okay? There are, of course, exceptions to the rule. You know, you can't advocate for violence or terrorism, or you can't really libel or slander people. You know, you can be sued for that kind of thing. And there are some people who believe letting these people make those arguments, and of course those people making those arguments, is a matter of freedom of speech, and therefore they shouldn't be flagged off of YouTube or Twitter or anything like this. This is wrong. This is not correct. This is not correct. If you advocate for sexual relationships with children, from adult to child, that is not freedom of speech. That is not protected under freedom of speech and expression. That is advocacy for harm. There is evidence to suggest that the vast majority of kids, whether it doesn't matter whether they're 4, 8, or even as old as 14 or 15, they will suffer from some kind of severe mental trauma from it. Now, it's not the case for all of them. I know that. And of course, that's what they'll argue with. They go, but there's this kid who had sex at this age, and, I had sex at this age, or it's perfectly fine. But, there are a lot of kids out there that have grown up now that are suffering massively. Massively. When it comes to sexually active teens, but, at the end of the day, it's still against the law, and I think the age of consent should be 18 and over, in my personal opinion. I know that teenagers are going to do it. I was a teenager once, that's all I wanted to do ever since I turned sexually active. That's all I wanted to do. But not with adults, full stop. I know that there's a different term for it. I believe it's called hebephilia rather than pedophilia. But irrelevant, not the point. Of course, that's not the main point of this video either, as Amos Yee is an advocate for having sex with kids as young as 4. So, let's respond to this crap, shall we?
A map is a minor attracted person. Basically, it is a cute little nickname pedophiles are giving themselves in order to get good PR.
I mean, that might be one of the reasons they implement the term map. And, the pedophile community should have better PR because they deserve to be defended.
This is Amos Yee, and guys, little bit of a disclosure here. I have just spent the last, maybe 30 minutes chopping up his video response to Shoe on Head, and I am angry. I am just really, really wound up right now. A lot of points that Amos Yee raises throughout this video are arguments just like this one here, that we should somehow destigmatize the concept of pedophilia, and that we shouldn't stigmatize, or that we shouldn't condemn people who have, a relationship with an underage person. We absolutely should keep this particular topic stigmatized in the entirety of our society. 100%. Children cannot consent. And that there is overwhelming evidence that many, many children who have been in these relationships have been catastrophically and devastatingly so damaged for the rest of their lives, needing therapy and other treatment to deal with their mental trauma. And if you're one of these people who's like, have you got a source for that, mate? Can we have a citation, please? Oh, don't worry. Don't worry. I'll show you some shortly.
I think that another reason why pedophiles choose to refer to themselves as MAP, though, is because the term pedophile, as you know, people treat that term with a lot of hostility in our modern culture. So I think in terms of like making them feel more comfortable about identifying themselves, they use the term MAP, and I think that's completely reasonable.
Sounds more like a Trojan horse to me, to be honest with you. If I'm honest, guys. If I'm honest here, it does sound like a Trojan freaking horse, doesn't it? And in fact, if you call it something like that, you know, MAP, minor attracted person, it doesn't have the same bite, does it? It doesn't have the same stigma behind it, you know? That's why we have to create the stigma behind it. MAPs are pedophiles, people. They're attracted to children, and they are a danger. Just because you call it something else doesn't mean you're not a pedo. Now, I just want to make it absolutely perfectly clear here that, you know, non-offending pedophiles who are trying to get help, who are trying to not act on their disgusting urges, you know, cool, whatever, I guess. They've not broken the law, and I don't think that they should, you know, be arrested or have anything physically done to them or anything like that. If they want to volunteer themselves for, you know, castration programs, I'm fairly sure the Ukraine has something like that, then awesome. But, you know, obviously I'm not encouraging violence against anybody here, nor am I encouraging death threats or anything else like that.
Call yourself whatever you want, as long as it motivates you more to defend people that are worth defending, it's all good.
Imagine genuinely believing that pedophiles are worthy of defending. Legal rights in terms of, you know, as long as they aren't and haven't done anything to break the law or, you know, abuse anybody, then fine. At the end of the day, you know, if you've not broken the law, then you shouldn't have to deal with any kind of legal consequences. But if there probably should be a list somewhere that you're put on, though, especially if you're open about this. I don't know.
I don't give him the same amount of shit as baby diddlers because he's not trying to normalize diddling babies.
Admittedly, there is a huge portion of the pedophile community that tries to defend sexual acts with babies. I do not want to associate with them. I think that defending sexual acts with babies is obviously extremely bad because babies are cognitively incapable of consenting to sexual acts. I feel that only at around the age of 4 are children perhaps able to consent to sexual acts, and even from the ages of 4 to 7, I think that is only a really small minority, and only perhaps gifted children.
Babies can't because of cognitive, behavioral, developmental issues, but 4-year-olds can. Excuse me for just one moment. No, they fucking can't. No, they fucking can't. Kids don't even understand abstract concepts until they reach the age of 8, you disgusting piece of fucking shit. Oh, I'm a fucking dad, right? And this piece of shit is trying to advocate for kids to have sex with adults, as if I'd ever let one of my fucking children have fucking relations or sex with an adult. This is not the fucking case. That is disgusting. Amos Yee, you are a piece of shit. Fuck's sake. Wanker. Fucking piece of shit. I don't even give a fuck about monetization for this shit. I don't even give a fuck if I get a strike. Fuck you, Amos, you fucking... Oh. Do you know how many kids... Do you know how many fucking kids have had their lives destroyed by this shit? Fuck's sake. Look at Andy Warski, for fuck's sake. You know, when he sat down on his live stream, debating OmniPolitics 16, who was sat there saying, oh yeah, kids can consent. No, they can't! No, they fucking can't! Andy Warski experienced abuse, I believe, twice in his life. And he admitted to his stutter being a massive part of it, and he had to have tons and tons of therapy, antidepressants, all that kind of stuff. Every single fucking person I've ever spoken to about their kids needing mental health treatment because of abuse as a kid. This is a difficult topic to cover, but I think it's important to do so. No, they fucking can't. No, they can't.
For ages 8 to 12, though, I would hazard that a majority of cases would be able to consent to sexual acts. And for children ages 12 and above, it is extremely clear that they are perfectly able to consent to sexual acts. They have enough cognitive ability, they have the ability to verbally communicate with an adult sufficiently.
Okay, let's have a look at your sources, shall we? Okay, so, guys, I find it absolutely hilarious that Amos Yee, somebody who's supposed to be university, college educated, has used the 3 sources that he did in his description because the first one is complete garbage and has nothing to do with anything. The second one actually debunks him and the rest of his map friends. And the third one is from a special interest group that has been involved in actual funding of special events that try to destigmatize paedophiles. And that was actually in the news not too long ago, for some of you may have heard of it. So the first study that he actually talks about is specifically about adult females having sex with prepubescent or teenage boys. And the sample itself isn't that big. And the second red flag is that the under 1,000 sample study actually didn't have any psychological evaluations of the people involved. It involved a great deal of people from prison and college, and their opinions were asked, not actual studies involved in this. And they were only given 3 choices to answer how they felt about their sexual abuse. Because that's what this is, folks. This is sexual abuse. If you have sex with an underage person, that is abuse. If you fondle them, that is abuse. End of discussion, really. But they were given the choice of how they felt about it, and they had the choice between good, bad, and mixed, which isn't exactly, a nuanced answer, is it? And it doesn't really kind of contribute to any statistics overall. And they were also asked what kind of effect it had on their sex life. And again, good, bad, none, mixed is not really any kind of indication of anything. Whereas I actually have some studies that I'm going to bring up in a minute that have some real numbers for you, where the study carried out actually has some tangible data that we can work with. Because again, pedophiles, maps, Amos Yee here, again, it's all flowery language designed to make you feel empathetic and sorry for these people and allow them to bugger your kids. Because their rights, their sexual desires are more important than your children's rights, folks. Remember that. Remember that. That is why people are so angry and mad at you all the goddamn time. That's why this will always remain stigmatized, you disgusting cretins. And looking at his second study, or would you look at this? He's not actually read it. And the second study, guys, I find hilarious because it pretty much debunks everything that he was talking about. It was a study that was aimed at Latino adults who were in the gay and bi community. And I guess he was trying to debunk our points with it. But actually, it showed overall having sex with an adult under the age of 16 actually resulted in them having terrible, awful lives, suffering from severe mental health problems, finding themselves engaged in loose and, finding themselves putting themselves as individuals at a much higher risk of contracting HIV because they were considerably more likely to be promiscuous when they reached adulthood and of course abused drugs and alcohol as well. And the third article that he uses is from a special pedo interest group who actually funded a meeting not too long ago in Baltimore. You may have heard of this particular event that went down. A lot of people were outraged by it, where they were trying to destigmatize the ideas of pedophilia. And I believe you can just Google that and hear some stories from people who were just absolutely disgusted, distraught, and horrified by what was said there. And this is their mission statement from beforeyouact.org, and it's to publicly promote professional services and resources for self-identified individuals who are sexually attracted to children and desire such assistance. See, now, this website, whereas I absolutely hate the fact that they are trying to actively destigmatize pedophilia, and I know that they have, quote unquote mental health experts working with pedos to try and push this concept. They actually do provide assistance to pedophiles to be able to manage their very, very disgusting mental derangement that they have. Now I'm going to debunk the hell out of this disgusting cretin for you. And of course, this is from the NSPCC. You can find it linked in the description. It tells us what types of sexual abuse there are, So there are two types of sexual abuse: contact and non-contact abuse. And sexual abuse can happen in person or online. Contact abuse is where an abuser makes physical contact with a child. This includes sexual touching of any part of a child's body, whether they're clothed or not, using a body part or object to rape or penetrate a child, forcing a child to take part in sexual activities, making a child undress or touch someone else. And of course, those children, because they're children and you're an adult, there is a massive power dynamic there, isn't there? So that relationship is not exactly, it doesn't really work both ways, does it? Because the child can't actually comprehend what's going on and what it means to be in an actual relationship. So again, if you do any of those things with a child, no matter how much that child, even if that child agrees with you, that doesn't mean it's not sexual abuse. And contact abuse can include touching, kissing, and oral sex. Sexual abuse isn't just penetrative. Non-contact abuse is where a child is abused without being touched by the abuser. This can be in person or online and includes exposing or flashing, showing pornography. I guess that means that I also fall under the category of being sexually abused as a child. Exposing a child to sexual acts, making them masturbate, forcing a child to make, view, or share child abuse images or videos, making, viewing, or distributing child abuse images or videos, forcing a child to take part in sexual activities or conversations online or through a smartphone. But the pedos won't be convinced by this, folks. They won't be convinced by this, because remember, when I say that they're doing this for themselves and it's just a purely selfish act, the complete disregard for the actual facts here, the development of an actual fucking child. They're selfish little shits. That's all they are. All this flowery language is to just simply to justify getting their dick shoved into a child. That's all they want. And lo and behold, again from the NSPCC, showing us what happens when this kind of thing starts. So emotional and behavioral science, avoiding being alone with or frightened of people or a person they know. Language or sexual behavior you wouldn't expect them to know, having nightmares or bedwetting, alcohol or drug misuse. Self-harm, changes in eating habits, or developing an eating problem. If a child is being or has been sexually abused online, they might spend a lot more or a lot less time than usual online, texting, gaming, or using social media, so being distant, seem distant, upset or angry after using the internet or texting, being secretive about who they're talking to and what they're doing online or on their mobile phone, have lots of new phone numbers, texts, or email addresses on their mobile phone, laptop, or tablet. Children and young people might also drop hints and clues about the abuse. And what are the effects of this? What are the actual effects? Sexual abuse can have both short and long-term effects. The impact of sexual abuse can last a lifetime, Amos. Children, young people, and adults may live with anxiety and depression, eating disorders, PTSD, difficulty coping with stress, self-harm, suicidal thoughts, and suicide, sexually transmitted infections, pregnancy, feeling of shame and guilt, drug and alcohol problems, relationship problems with family, friends, and partners. Survivors of sexual abuse often have, a lot of trouble with relationships, and they can find themselves being far too clingy or being far too distant. And of course, here's my data actually debunking Amos fully 100%, and the fact that he can't argue with it. you know, unless he somehow goes in there and tries to skew everything. But now, of course, this will be linked in the description. I recommend you guys could give it a read. In a community sample that responded to mailed questionnaires, 14.2% of men and 32.3% of women reported experienced sexual abuse, such as unwanted kissing or touching in a sexual way by someone 5 or more years older to them, before the age of 18 years. Physical abuse, such as being hit with a fist, kicked, thrown, burned, or bruised on purpose, was reported by 22.2% of men and 19.5% of women. Approximately 21% of those who had been abused were abused both sexually and physically. Among all respondents, 37% reported either sexual or physical abuse in childhood. Data from the NCS indicated a relationship between child sexual abuse and the subsequent onset of psychiatric disorder, and findings revealed that 78% of women and 82% of men who reported CSA met diagnostic criteria for at least one lifetime psychiatric disorder versus 49% and 51% respectively among those who did not report CSA. It's almost as if you're a lying shit, Amos. It's almost as if you don't actually know how to frickin' read, Amos. It's almost as if these kind of relationships actually destroy children's lives. Oh, it's funny that, isn't it? The odds ratio for lifetime history of depression was 1.8 among men and women who reported a history of CSA versus those who did not. Overall, after controlling for other childhood adversities, CSA was found to be significantly associated with mood, substance abuse, and anxiety disorders in both sexes. In a recent meta-analysis that looked at 37% longitudinal studies from across the world between 1980 and 2008, with over 3,160,000 participants, it was calculated that there was a statistically significant association between sexual abuse and a lifetime diagnosis of anxiety, depression, major depressive disorder, eating disorders, post-traumatic stress disorders, sleep disorder, and suicide attempts. Your study had fewer than 1,000 people. My one has over 3 million, motherfucker! Try to debunk me now, prick! This association persisted irrespective of gender and age at which CSA occurred. The same authors conducted another systematic review and meta-analysis that demonstrated an association between CSA and medical symptoms such as chronic pelvic pain, functional gastrointestinal disorders, psychogenic seizures, and non-specific pain and somatic symptoms. In both the meta-analysis mentioned above, the associations were strengthened when a history of rape was present. Wow, it's almost as if the things we've been saying have overwhelming evidence against your crappy arguments, Amos. Oh dear. Other studies have shown similar findings and reported that the association between CSA and lifetime occurrence of psychiatric disorder persists irrespective of gender, socioeconomic status, relationship to the abuser, number of abuse episodes, and the type of CSA that may have occurred. So you can't even get away with the little cheeky stuff there, Amos, either. It's almost as if everything that you advocate for can destroy people. What about their rights, dickhead? What about the rights of these kids, huh? An important factor to note in CSA studies is that sexual abuse may be coupled with other forms of abuse, including physical and verbal abuse. This may often confound the causation of psychiatric disorders and observations reported. Boom! You've just been debunked, motherfucker! All of your arguments, every single one of your arguments in favor of letting adults have any kind of relationship with children that involves sexual abuse, because that's what it is, dickhead. It's sexual fucking abuse will result, well, most likely in that child's life being utterly destroyed. These people often go on to suffer from some of the worst mental health disorders and have extreme issues developing relationships later in life, either becoming hypersexualized or becoming a hermit. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I have just sat here and just completely smashed and debunked everything that has come out of Amos Yee's mouth. And whereas there could be subjective arguments surrounding the ability to converse with these individuals, I have fully destroyed everything that has come out of his mouth so far. Now, unfortunately, there is more. There is quite a bit more. You see, when I was chopping up his video, ready to respond, I didn't think it'd go that far. I didn't think I'd have to go that far. And so I'll have to do a part 2, maybe even a part 3, because there's some other stuff as well. There's not just the rest of this video to respond to, but there's a couple other things as well that I think is definitely worth mentioning. But guys, let me know what you think about my video, and of course Shoes and Amos's video down below in the comment section. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. I'm fairly sure that Amos will just completely disregard everything that I have said, because he's disregarded everyone else's arguments despite all the sources being thrown at him. But this video was still worth making, and there's still quite a bit to go yet, guys. Still quite a bit to go. But thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you got to this part of the video. I really do appreciate it. If you appreciate what I did here, smash that like button, subscribe if you're new, and of course there are plenty of other ways to support the channel. Check out the links in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Alex of Irate Alex, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.